What it do? Welcome to another new episode of Locked On Bucks. On today's show, the Milwaukee Bucks ended the Cleveland Cavaliers 8-game win streak with a 126-116 victory over the Cavs. The Bucks' big three were outstanding tonight, with Giannis leading the way. A big Giannis triple-double tonight, his 7th of the season. We're going to discuss the game, see if we saw anything different tonight with the new coach, quote unquote, in place tonight, as well as discuss Jon Horst's comments on the dismissal of Adrian Griffin. All that and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucks.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
You are Locked On Bucks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Camille Davis. You can catch me weekly on the Technical Foul podcast, as well as Cheesehead TV's Carry the G and MKE. Although the season has ended, make sure y'all check that out. Joining me is longtime voice of the pod and founder of BrewHoop.com, Frank Madden. We appreciate you for tuning in, and we thank you for making Locked On Bucks your first listen every single day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, as well as on YouTube. And this episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. So go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use the code all lowercase LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Now, Frank, the last time the Bucks saw the Cavs, about a week ago, literally a week ago, Wednesday to Wednesday, the Bucks got blown out by 40 points. And things look a little bit different on the sideline. As we all know at this point, the Bucks have relieved head coach Adrian Griffin of his duties. Joe Prunty was the interim head coach tonight, while the Bucks got their lick back with the 126-116 victory, as mentioned. And this was an important game coming up. We knew it the moment that the Bucks got blown out last week by the Cavs that this game was going to be big for them, because the Cavs have been outstanding so far in the month of January. They have been gaining on the Bucks in the standings. We're aware that the Bucks have a difficult schedule coming up, so this win was very much needed against the Cavs. With the new head coach in place, interim for the moment, did you happen to notice anything different from this team tonight?
I don't think we saw anything dramatically different. I think especially in the second half, they had probably like 4 or 5 miscommunications on coverages on the perimeter that led to open threes. I think the Cavs missed most of them, although they started to punish them a bit more in that little fourth quarter run they had. I think we saw a whole lot of Giannis pick and roll down the stretch, which obviously, we've seen a lot of that in crunch time, I'd say, throughout the season, but it's obviously been just sort of a common refrain. It's like, why isn't there more of that?
Right.
Again, Joe Prunty's been here, right? I think it's going to be a more interesting question once Doc Rivers, can we say Doc Rivers' name out loud?
Right, that's the word.
Seems
can we say it?
Yeah, Jon Horst wasn't saying the name during the press conference today, but all indications reporting is that Doc Rivers is signed, sealed, and delivered. So I think that's going to be the real question. Bringing in somebody obviously who's been on the outside. We've heard some of his thoughts on the Bucks based on some of the interviews he's done with Bill Simmons at the Ringer. And he's talked a lot about the Giannis pick and roll and needing more of the ball in Dame's hands. But yeah, it felt like tonight was honestly, Camille, when they were up by 21 in the third quarter, I was sitting there thinking, is this going to end up being just like the most normal, well-played Bucks game of the season? Like no weird like deficits, blown leads, playing with their food, just Giannis being awesome. Not like peak Dame or anything like that, but Dame was good. He didn't shoot quite as well from the field as you might like, but got to the line a bit. Generally I thought controlled the pace and tempo of the game pretty well. And Chris was really good again tonight as well. And so it's kind of like, man, are they just gonna like take? They closed well in the second quarter, 10-point lead at half. Very good defensive first half, 51 points allowed to the Cavs, who have been awesome as you referenced of late. And so, yeah, I was holding out hope that maybe they would just like run away and hide, and it would be like a non-dramatic game. And it wasn't dramatic, but I think it got as close as 6 at one point in the fourth quarter as the Cavs started to make some shots, which, hey, that's fair, right? You can't expect the Cavs to just, go 6 for 43 every game. But it was good to see. I mean, there really wasn't a 3-point differential in this game, and the Bucks, kind of controlled it throughout. I don't know. Was this wire to wire? maybe. I think it might have been wire to wire,
I
right? Because
believe so.
Chris scored the first basket of the game, right? I
Yep.
think, and I think they were then up like 6-2, and they kind of got out to a bit of a lead. So I think that may have been a wire to wire win, which, normalcy, well played basketball, wire to wire win. That's those are kind of things all go together. So, yeah, Chris, Dame, and then just an absolute superlative performance from Giannis.
Man.
That's a pretty good recipe for Bucks basketball. And I mean, I'm not going to say, I mean, we've seen this team have fun throughout the season, right? Like we've seen Malik Beasley doing his wiggles. We've seen Giannis celebrating, Thanasis doing Thanasis stuff. It's not like this has been like a joyless season on the
Right.
court or something like that. But it was good. It was nice. It was refreshing to see guys seemingly having a lot of fun on the floor, and ultimately coming away with a victory against a team that, again, has been playing really well. And they are down a couple of major pieces in Evan Mobley and Darius Garland, but seem to have figured out a rhythm and kind of just a way of playing, which has involved a ton of 3-point shooting. And
Yep.
old friend Sam Merrill, who we saw hitting some threes tonight. And so fortunately the Bucks were able to kind of contain them early and just kind of play from the front and again just kind of control the game.
Yeah, absolutely. And the Sam Merrill threes, when he hit those 3 threes in a row, it's just like, my goodness, this guy can get hot really quickly. And I mean, 2 of those, well, honestly, all 3 of those. No, I'll say 2. 2 of them for sure that I remember came off of just the Bucks getting killed and pick and roll like we've seen before. To your point, like, was there anything different? Not too much. This team looked like the Milwaukee Bucks do when they have some effort and they're playing really hard. You could tell this was a game they wanted. Not only, I would think, because of the standings and what that means. As mentioned, the Cavs have been right behind them, but there's been a lot of noise around this team with the dismissal of Adrian Griffin, all the noise around who the next head coach is going to be. So being able to get out on the floor, just play basketball, like you said, have fun, I think was good for this team. And we mentioned that Giannis was doing this thing, 35 points, 18 rebounds, 10 assists, a monster triple-double. And the last couple assists that he had came at a time where the Bucks needed it because, like you mentioned, the Cavs were pushing in that fourth quarter. The Bucks won all 3 of the first quarters, but the fourth quarter was the only quarter the Cavs won, again, making it very close for them. And Giannis was whipping passes to the corners, to open shooters, and the open shooters happened to be Chris Middleton and Malik Beasley. So you'd love to see that involvement. We mentioned that Chris Middleton had a good game tonight, 24 points, 8 of 15 from the field. Dame, like you said, didn't shoot as well as you like to see from the field itself, but the fact that he continuously get himself to the free throw line, Dame shot 11 free throws tonight while Giannis only had 3. Like that's something that I'm not used to seeing on this team. And it just goes to show again, the force that Dame was playing with his shot not falling, trying to make something happen, going to the rim. We have seen that in the past be a detriment to him when the ref isn't calling these fouls and he's still trying to sell them. But listen, the whistle was going for him a bit tonight, and he was able to get those to fall. And Frank, I want to get your opinion on something because talked about the big 3, of course, led with Giannis, and I think that's fair because of what he's been doing this season. This is his 7th triple-double of the season. We are 44 games into the season. He has already tied his career most triple-doubles in a season. He has been putting up some gaudy numbers himself. We know he broke the franchise record of points this season with 64. He's been shooting the ball well, even with the lower usage rate with Dame being in town. And I want to just get your opinion on Giannis and the MVP race when we come back from this break. Writing can be difficult. Staring at a blank page with the cursor flashing and no idea where to start, it can be frustrating. And writing doesn't have to be that. It should really be another form of expression, something fun. And when it comes to writing, Grammarly is there to support you from start to finish. For over 10 years, Grammarly has been powered by AI technology that you can trust to help you across all places where you write the most. And now, Grammarly even helps you do more. With just one click, you can easily, and I do mean easily, brainstorm, rewrite, and reply with suggestions based on your context and your goals. So you can improve productivity for you and your teams. So when you're stuck writing with work, Grammarly can help you get started with ideas, outlines, and even tips. For myself, something I would go and ask Grammarly is just like, hey, could you give me 10 possible taglines for a video thumbnail? and they would generate something for me to consider, tweak, and use to my own liking. So if you need to draft something like an important email and you don't know where to start, Grammarly also has suggestions that could jumpstart your writing. Start being more productive at work. Go to grammarly.com/podcast to download for free today. That's GRAMMARLY.com/podcast. Prize Picks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. And honestly, it's no wonder why that is. It's the easiest and the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports because it's just you against the numbers. There is no worrying about battling against thousands of other players, which normally includes those pros and those sharks. With Prize Picks, you just pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 different player stat projections and you watch the winnings roll in. Me personally, one thing that I love the most about Prize Picks is the quick withdrawals. When I win, I want my money quickly. I'm patient about a lot, but not about my coins. So when you combine that quick withdrawal plus the easy gameplay, plus enormous selection of players and stat types, it all adds up to make Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. So go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match of up to $100. Again, go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy. We truly appreciate you for tuning in to Locked On Bucks. We do our best to bring you Milwaukee Bucks content every single day. And when the Bucks are the center of the NBA world, we're bringing you more content than just one a day. So a special shout out to the everydayers who do tune in Monday through Friday for every episode. And if you enjoy what we do at Locked On Bucks, I got to put you on Locked On Sports because Locked On Sports is the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel available on YouTube. On there, you will see 24/7 coverage of top sports stories of the day. And all of it is brought to you by the local experts of Locked On. Plus, you get to see our national shows that cover every league as well. Go to Locked On Sports today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24 streaming channel. Now, Frank, like I asked before the break, Giannis and the MVP conversation. There's been a lot of noise around the Bucks, even before the dismissal of Adrian Griffin, just around like, hey, this team doesn't look right. This team should be looking a little bit better, despite the fact that at the time of Adrian Griffin's dismissal, he had a 30-13 record, and the Bucks were second in the East at that time, as they are now. But Giannis's name hasn't really been one you've heard a lot at the top of the MVP charts. And listen, that is not me saying that there are no other players who are playing well, because what you see Embiid doing has been dope. What you see Shai Gilgeous-Alexander doing has been amazing. Luka, there's a lot of guys playing some good ball. But do you think that Giannis's name should be spoken about a little bit more, or do you think that this noise around the team is kind of affecting that a bit?
I mean, I think the noise hurts, right? I think the narrative around the Bucks in general is kind of going to drag everyone down to an extent. I mean, Dame's all-star candidacy, which I think if you look at the advanced metrics and even just like, you know, the raw per minute type stuff, I mean, he's right there with the guys that a lot of people think are like clearly ahead of him in the all-star race, including like Jalen Brunson, Tyrese Maxey. I mean, if you didn't know what the narratives were around these guys, like, you know, you would not guess that like Tyrese Maxey and Jalen Brunson are like the no-brainer guys ahead of Dame or anything like that. So I think that's hard, and I think it's especially crappy for Giannis because like Giannis has been kind of the guy holding the ship together.
Right.
You know, I think he's got the single best argument for like why they're 31-13 and not worse. And I mean, there's a stat, clutch wins added, which I'll retweet it later tonight, so if people want to see it. But basically, it looks at, you know, what players do in the last 5 minutes and kind of uses some advanced metrics and basically figures out like, or sorry, it's win probability added. And Giannis is like way ahead in that, which kind of surprised me, right? Because we know he's always been a great fourth quarter scorer. He's leading the NBA in fourth quarter points. But he's kind of doing everything, even in clutch time, when we think of him not being the guy with the ball in his hand. So I hope that, you know, we get a bit more acknowledgement of what Giannis is doing. And I think there's basically, I think, 3 guys that he's got to leapfrog, right? It's Jokic, it's Embiid, it's Gilgeous-Alexander in some order. I think Embiid will probably be the front runner, just given the historic scoring that he's been doing. And he's got the opposite. Like, everybody thought the Sixers were going to be, in trouble, and now they're a nice story. It's like, well, they're slightly behind the Bucks in the standings, but nobody seems to care about that. So I think Embiid's probably the front runner right now, again, just because of the scoring stats, which are historically incredible, like literally the highest per minute scoring average in the history of the sport, including Wilt's 50-point per game season. Like, he's even scoring more per minute than Wilt did back then. So I think it's going to be tough. Embiid has already missed 10 games. If he misses 8 more games, he's no longer going to be eligible because of the 65-game requirement that exists this year. And so I think a lot of this honestly comes down to a couple things. I think it's going to come down to where the Bucks end up in the standings relative to those other guys. I think if, Denver wins the West in the regular season, and, let's say Embiid does miss too many games, I think Jokic is probably going to win MVP because of just, again, combination of coming off the championship, perception of being the best player in the world who's proven it by winning a championship. The statistical stuff remains absolutely incredible when you look at some of the aggregate catch-all type stats. And then I think with Shea, I have a hard time seeing Shea leap ahead of both Joe and Jokic. I could see him finishing ahead of Giannis just because, again, the narrative, like, he's fresh, he's new, like, we haven't put him in the All-Star or the MVP conversation yet. And I think, honestly, Giannis's biggest problem is that not only for what you reference as far as just the Bucks, like, being just kind of like, oh, what's wrong with the Bucks? Like, that whole storyline, like the Debbie Downer storyline, is never going to make it easier to win MVP. But I think the other piece too with Giannis is, I think, especially when a guy has gotten to the mountaintop and he's been the MVP a couple times, like, the media needs some narrative about, like, how he's better than he was in the past. And it doesn't even need to necessarily be like a real thing. Like, he might be worse at other stuff, but, like, oh, he's added this to his game. And, like, we see it with Embiid, people are like, oh, look at his passing this year, right? It's like, you see what Giannis is doing tonight? He's got almost 4 triple doubles in a row, 3 out of 4.
3 out of 4, yeah.
The 3 passes I posted on Twitter, that right around inside 2 minutes tonight, he makes 3 utterly awesome passes in the span of about 20-25 seconds of game action. The catch one hand, whip one hand to Chris in the corner, who misses it. Brooke tap out. Giannis gets it back. Immediately another bullet pass right back to Chris. What a beautiful statement about their relationship, right? Like, Chris, I trust you, brother.
He knew he wasn't going to miss twice.
Exactly. And he cashes that one out. And then Donovan Mitchell pulls a quick 3. Giannis gets the rebound, dribble down. Giannis starts cutting across, and one of those little, like, almost whipped bowling ball passes to the corner for Malik Beasley. Giannis is, I mean, if you guys haven't seen the clip, Giannis is running down the floor with his finger up, like, saying, like, we got it, as Bees is, like, letting go of the shot. It was like a beautiful statement of belief in Malik Beasley, who's been cashing those shots for Giannis all season. So, what a great sort of statement of his passing ability, which, again, for some reason, like, Giannis's ball handling and his passing just, like, are perpetually, like, ignored by, like, average fans, casual fans, like the Hooper versus baller stuff. Like, don't those people, like, respect awesome passing and dribbling and being able to create your own shot? Like, why is a 7-footer who can do that better than, like, anybody we've ever seen in the history of the sport, like, not appreciated for that? I don't know, Camille. It's stupid. It makes no sense. Like, skill is not just mid-range jump shots, but for some reason that's what people kind of over-index on. So I think they're probably, there's got to be, like, a little bit also the perception of, like, well, Giannis is, because, like, look at what Giannis is doing. His finishing at the rim, his ability to create shots in the paint. I mean, he's just kind of like the guy he was, and he's just doing that stuff better than ever. He's not taking as many threes. Was 1 for 1 tonight. And he's, just kind of doing stuff, right? Like, if he was shooting 75% from the foul line, I bet people would be like, oh, he solved that part of his game,
Right.
So, get over 70% from the line, maybe that would probably help the perception a little bit too. So I don't know. I think it's going to be really hard. I don't wish ill on Joel Embiid, but maybe rest him 8 more games, get him out of the MVP conversation. And then I think a lot of it just comes down to how well the Bucks finish. They're going to have a lot of primetime games against these guys. They've got Jokic coming up here right around the corner. They've got a couple more games against the Sixers as well. So, again, I don't think those individual matchups, especially given that he doesn't, like, traditionally guard those guys one-on-one, is like the way that you decide the MVP. But I mean, if you want to make your MVP case and you're kind of working from behind a little bit, the best way to catch up is to go out and wreck the dudes that are ahead of you and win those games. So fingers crossed, knock on wood, that the Bucks can make some noise and turn stuff around. And again, if they start playing better basketball, then I think people will gladly say like, "Oh, Doc Rivers, ooh, they've done some good things," and hopefully that narrative can flip a little bit, even if again they haven't necessarily like become a radically different team.
Right, right. And I think what could help as well when you're looking at future forecasting for Giannis, you mentioned a lot of great points. And I think one that should also be mentioned is the fact that the Bucks have the toughest schedule remaining in the NBA so far this season. So we've seen what Giannis has been doing against one of the easiest schedules in the NBA. Now it's flipping. And now the Bucks do have the most difficult schedule remaining in the NBA. If you're out here putting up big numbers against big competition, that should definitely go for something. Like, the Bucks have to still see remaining this season the Celtics twice, the Timberwolves twice, the Thunder twice, the 76ers twice, the Nuggets twice, and the Clippers twice. And the Clippers have been playing some really good ball as well. And to rewind to your passing point, Giannis has always been somebody who's been a willing passer. He's always had an affinity for it. And I felt like when Bud implemented his 5-out system, that helped out Giannis a little bit more because he always knew where someone was supposed to be at on the floor. So a lot of those no looks, those blind passes, he could do it trusting that his teammates were going to be in the spots on the floor where he thought that they would be. Earlier in the season, I said, I think there's going to be a little bit of an adjustment for Giannis getting used to where guys are on the court, some new teammates, getting familiar with that. And when you add in the fact that another guy he can pass the ball to is Damian Lillard, somebody who so far this season hasn't shot as well as we know that he can, as he historically can, that's going to open up a lot more assist opportunities for Giannis as well. The fact that he's already tied his career or season high of triple doubles already at this point in the season, I think he's going to cross that double digit line this season at this pace for sure. So something to consider with this team, something to go forward with. And like you mentioned, there's been a lot of narrative around this team. And today, Jon Horst got up in front of the media and he wanted to have a conversation about what happened and address a little bit of the narrative as well. We're going to react to some of the comments from Jon Horst after this. Whether you're braving the cold or you're dealing with crowds, grocery shopping at this time of the year is the worst. And it's been freezing here in Milwaukee. It was 35, 36 degrees today, and it felt like a heat wave. So with weather like this, why not stay home and let Hungry Root handle it for you? With Hungry Root, you can kickstart a week of healthy eating and you can get groceries delivered right to your door. Hungry Root makes it easier for everyone to get healthy. They support all of the major diets and lifestyles like gluten-free, vegan, dairy-free, vegetarian, and so many others. You head to Hungry Root, you take a fun short quiz, and then Hungry Root will get to know you, your goals, and how you like to eat. They'll ask you what flavors you like, what kitchen appliances you use, and more, just to make sure that what they're sending you actually fits your needs and your preferences. Hungry Root goes beyond the weekly grocery haul with thousands of easy recipes that actually will put your groceries to good use before they get forgotten in the back of the fridge. And we've all been there where you're like, I'm going to eat really healthy this week. You get all this salad, you get all these vegetables, and the next thing you know, they're behind the takeout in the fridge. The best part about Hungry Root is that it follows a simple standard. It's got to taste good, it's got to be quick to make, and it has to contain whole and trusted ingredients. Right now, Hungry Root is offering Locked On Bucks listeners 40% off your first delivery, and you will also get free veggies for life. Just go to hungryroot.com/lockedon to get 40% off your first delivery and get your free veggies. That's hungryroot.com/lockedon. And don't forget to use our link so they can know that we sent you. Jon Horst spoke today ahead of the Bucks game against the Cavaliers, and he talked about the dismissal of Adrian Griffin. He came out very at the top saying, hey, there's no Doc Rivers talk. This is the press conference about the dismissal of Adrian Griffin if you want to talk about that. And my first thoughts after hearing some of his comments was just first like, Jon Horst is good at his job. He is not going to give too much away in these comments. He was able to navigate that line very successfully. But I did hear a theme myself while he was talking, and I kept hearing the words maximizing an opportunity. And I feel like that is what he was banking on and talked about. That's why they let Adrian Griffin go. He said, quote, "The team itself has changed from when we hired him, and we felt an opportunity to improve and get better, and we wanted to take advantage of that opportunity." Later on in the conference, he also mentioned the fact that, quote, "I believe in this team at a high level and ownership, myself and Peter. We've continued to be bold and be aggressive and try to figure out how to maximize these chances we have, and that's what we're doing here." He also said that, quote, "What we're looking for now is a path to go forward and maximize this group from a leadership perspective and an experience perspective. We want to try to bring in a coach that can really take us to the next level where we think we can go with this group. And again, that is not just about coaching. The players have to be better and have to improve. My group has to continue to figure out how to improve the roster, but we think coaching is an element for us to get better." And with all that Jon Horst said, like I mentioned, he didn't say much, but what was clear is that he felt that, listen, Adrian Griffin was good, and he thinks that Adrian Griffin will get another opportunity to coach in the NBA. But right now, for what this team needs, as this team has changed, with Giannis having signed his extension, with Dame being on the roster, with Brooke back, with Chris back, that the window of opportunity is now, and there's a sense of urgency that they don't want to waste.
Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and say, there was definitely some things that were said for the sake of being said, right? Not trying to kick Adrian Griffin on the way out. So
Gotta have
I
some
don't.
class.
Yeah, is Adrian Griffin ever gonna be a head coach again in the NBA? I would probably guess not. Although I'm curious where we should probably look this up, Camille, like where he ranks on the all-time coach winning percentage list, because he might be at the very top.
At least
Like
you can say that.
he's 69.8%. I think I saw his winning percentage was this year. So hey, if he just never is a head coach again, he can retire with if not the best career winning percentage. So yeah, I don't know that that's of too much solace, but at least he'll still get paid out his contract, so he'll be fine. I thought probably the thing that kind of made me chuckle most was he very correctly, John made it clear he did not consult with any of his
Oh, yeah.
players. It
Yep.
was his decision. Jon Horst was just observing from just watching himself. Of course, would never ask Giannis his opinion about whether or not he wants a new coach. Would never ask Dame a question so bold. Would never put them in that position. So yes, he took that responsibility. So
Good at his job.
you can't blame Giannis and Dame,
Yeah.
and of course, absolutely no one will
Will think to do so.
will believe that. But you got to say what you got to say. So yeah, he did what he had to do. Show your face in front of the media, right? If it's your call, you gotta face the music, and you gotta take accountability for that. He did it, and as I was saying last night when Justin and I were talking about it in the second pod that we did collectively yesterday, I give the Bucks credit. Like they said, this isn't working, and typically teams will kind of try to power through and hope that things are going to change. And the Bucks said, you know what? We've seen enough. And I mentioned it last night as well. I mean, when teams make mistakes with coaches, it's when they hire the wrong guy. It's generally not that they fired the wrong guy, right? When you fire a guy, it's because he's been in, your building, you've been watching him, you've been working with him, you know how the guy operates, and you can tell whether things are working or not. Of course, some great coaches have been fired. Some guys have gotten fired in one place and had great success. Others, yes, that happens absolutely. But typically, when teams move on, it's because something has to happen. And I think we obviously all speculated about whether they would get to that point, and we got our answer. Yes, they did. And the original sin here is the fact that they hired Griff in the first place. And I think we can obviously. I think I mentioned last night. I mean, I think it reflects poorly on almost everybody, right? Whether you want to say like, well, Giannis, you shouldn't have thrown your support behind him. You shouldn't have been anti-Nick Nurse. Dame, you haven't been what we thought you were going to be this year. Have you been playing hard enough for Griff? Were you mad about Terry Stotts? And of course, Jon Horst, the front office, for ultimately being the guys that hired him and now have had to fire him. But better to do it now than to just sort of let it fester. And I think the only The only concern I would have is, I think Doc is a very reasonable guy to bring in under these circumstances, but nobody would have said, Doc Rivers, we want you as fans. I'm saying, I'm projecting myself and fans, but like nobody had Doc Rivers at the top of their list over the summer when you had a lot more options. And so now you're in a position, we don't know exactly what his contractual situation is going to be, but you can bet he's not here for 6 months and then needing a new contract. I'm guessing he's got probably 3 years, at least 2, including this one. And it will be very costly if the Bucks decide to move on from him next summer. And so that's an interesting question. Like, what do the Bucks have to accomplish? What does Doc Rivers need to show to not get fired and be the 3rd Bucks coach getting paid while not being employed by the team next year? We'll see. But of course, not having a training camp, it's like, it's tough. We talked about Adrian Griffin being up against, between a rock and a hard place as a first-year head coach with the expectations and everything that went into this season. But even Doc Rivers, as experienced as he is, coming in mid-season, that's also really difficult. So again, I thought Jon Horst made an interesting point about players and how adaptable they are. Guys get traded, they fit in and figure stuff out, and so I think it'll be interesting to see just how much the Bucks change. What different vision does Doc Rivers have for this team than what we've seen so far. So I think that'll be obviously something that we'll probably talk a lot about. And I thought the only other thing probably news-wise from today was just, I think Woj referenced Dave Yeager as, a potential candidate to join the staff. Obviously, he's not going to come in and, totally like bring in a whole new assistant coaching staff. But Dave Yeager, a guy that has been head coach in multiple places, has had real success, probably got a raw deal. I think it was in Sacramento was his last stop, when it was sort of the turnstile of head coaches in Sacramento. So, Dave Yeager, the kind of guy, like if Dave Yeager had been on Adrian Griffin's staff, like Terry Stotts, if you fire Griff, you're probably just elevating him to head coach. So if you could bring in Doc Rivers and you bring in a guy like Dave Yeager, who worked with Doc in Philadelphia the last couple of years, I think you're just adding a lot of veteran kind of coaching competency to the bench, which, again, one of the challenges of being a first-year head coach, you're probably not going to hire the best staff because you've never had to do that before, and you don't have, the stable of guys that are going to follow you around, which obviously Bud, that was a huge strength of his.
Absolutely. And you made the comment about if you would have known that Doc Rivers was going to be the coach, it's not really inspiring, but it's crazy how much things change after seeing the Bucks play this season. And I was still saying maybe they can still win with Griff. If they can just adjust maybe some personnel, if they can get the defense together, the low hanging fruit. And then you still saw some of the defensive miscommunications tonight as well with this team that needs to be cleaned up. But if you would have told me back in May that Doc Rivers was going to be the guy, I would have said, but we got Doc Rivers at home. We just got rid of Doc Rivers at home with Mike Budenholzer. Some of their perceived weaknesses happen to be the same, although Doc has a more sordid history when it comes to flaming out in the playoffs, I'll say. But there's going to be a lot more time to talk about what Doc brings and what Doc doesn't once the news of that we've heard so far be reported about him being hired becomes official by the Milwaukee Bucks. So I think that's a good place to wrap up here on the day. Appreciate you all for tuning in to Locked On Bucks. As a reminder, make sure you check out Locked On Sports today on YouTube and make sure that you subscribe. For Frank and myself, we'll catch you later.